All right, welcome to Creekside Book by Book, and this is my favorite book we're jumping into, Judges. It is for somebody who learned to read with comic books. This is the closest book to like superheroes because it's normal people who God empowers to do amazing things. Now, one of the challenges with the book of Judges, though, as we read through this, and often in Sunday school growing up, we would get these stories of Gideon and Samson, and they would be heroes of the faith. But these judges are not often heroes. Sometimes they're actually terrible people. And when we read through the book, we will note like there are definite heroic acts that are happening, but something that I appreciate about the Bible is that the writers of Scripture, they do not try to hide any of the faults of the people that they're writing about, and they are presented as very human people. And the reason that this book exists is not to show us all the examples of people that we should follow, but to show us the degradation of the people as they are living in the land. Like we saw Joshua, and the general theme and tone of Joshua is faithfulness and victory from the Lord. Joshua was a charismatic leader that was used by God to unite the people. But after Joshua died, and we're going to pick up in this book with the after Joshua died motif, and we're going to have two chapters that kind of talk about Joshua. After Joshua died, instead of having a unified nation, the tribes all sort of fracture and do their own things. And as we read through the book, there's something that is going to be important, is the Levites, who should have been the ones to unify the people. The Levites actually are fairly absent from this book. And so there is no central leader in the civic scope. And there does not seem to be any kind of central leadership provided by the priests and the Levites. And the priests and Levites that we do see are kind of despicable people as we walk through this book. And we see idolatry creeping into the nation and mingling between the people of Israel and their neighbors. And so this book is complicated. And so I fell in love with this book as a junior hire who really loved the action of it. And as I've grown older, I've come to appreciate more the complications of the people that we are going to study. And I wanted to give you just a quick picture of the timeline of what we're working with in this book. And dating this book is kind of tricky for a couple different factors, but so I have a couple different examples of what the timeline could look like for the book of Judges. So I'm going to share this. All right, and so here are some different timelines that people have established. And so we have generally 1370s as the starting point for when the book of Judges takes place. And then these are the different judges that are listed over here. And as we walk through the different judges, there's going to be essentially a judge associated with each tribe throughout their history. And they will overlap a little bit. And so the chronology isn't necessarily the importance as we walk through this. And so we're going to see different judges serving in different ways throughout the history. And the tribes are going to be kind of dealing with their own issues. And these judges might serve in the tribe's capacity, and maybe partner with another tribe from time to time, but it is not a unified nation that is being presented. And part of the reason for that could be that the person who's writing the book of Judges, often people think it would be the prophet Samuel. Whoever is writing the book of Judges is trying to help later generations understand how Israel got to the place where they needed a king. And so that's one of the theories behind why this book exists. And then the notion that Samuel would be the writer, then, like when we get to First Samuel, we'll see he's really kind of the last judge of Israel. But he's a much more central leader for the whole nation. And so when he's writing, the people reject his leadership essentially and say they want a king. And so Samuel may have written this as a way to say, all right, this is how we got to here. And now they're transitioning into the kingdom. Now, the word judges, as we walk through this, is also something that we should clarify, because these people, most of them don't actually do any judging in the way that we would consider a judge for in our culture today. And so really the judges are rescuers or liberators. The only one that we really see doing any kind of judging would be Deborah, and she's a prophet, and the people come to her for wisdom and leadership. But that's really the closest judge we have. So I wanted to give you that kind of overview of the book as we jump in. The first few judges we're going to look at, we're going to get through Deborah and Jael today. We're going to go through chapters 1 through 5. Those first few judges seem to be strong and like do good things, and they lead to periods of rest for the people. But as time goes on, the judges get progressively worse. They're not as good. And like the central character in the book of Judges is Samson. We have the most chapters talking about him, and he is not a good example of faithfulness. And we'll talk about that when we get to him. But Gideon is a coward. And then the Levites that we see later are practicing idolatry and not following the Lord at all. So things get progressively worse over time. So let's just jump into chapter 1. We got a lot of ground to cover. And so we will read and talk as we go. So chapter 1, verse 1. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, who of us is going to go up first to fight against the Canaanites? The Lord answered, Judah shall go up. I have given the land into their hands. Then the men of Judah said to the Simeonites, their fellow Israelites, come with us into the territory allotted to us and fight against the Canaanites. We in turn will go with you into yours. So the Simeonites went up with them. When Judah attacked, the Lord gave the Canaanites and Perizzites into their hands, and they struck down 10,000 men at Bezek. It was there that they found Adonai-Bezek, and Adonai-Bezek is the Lord of Bezek. It's like a title, not necessarily a name. The king of Bezek, and fought against him, putting to rout the Canaanites, the Perizzites. That Adonai-Bezek fled, but they chased him and caught off his thumbs and big toes. Then Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and toes cut off have picked up scraps under my table. Now God has paid me back for what I did to them. They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. The men of Judah attacked Jerusalem also and took it. They put the city to the sword and set it on fire. After that, Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites living in the hill country, the Negev and the western foothills. They advanced against the Canaanites living in Hebron, formerly Kiriath Arba, and defeated Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. From there, they advanced against the people living in Debir, formerly called Kiriath Sefer. And I'll pause there. And so here we see some kind of unity between tribes as we're starting off. They are asking the Lord, we left Joshua and they had not fully driven out all of the Canaanites from the land. And so they said, okay, Lord, what should we do now? And probably going to the priests and using the Urim and the Thummim, they, determined what the Lord would have them do. And so Judah went up, and Judah asked Simeon, and Simeon is the tribe of Simeon's land is inside the tribe of Judah's land, if you remember from the map. And so it would be natural for them to work together because they're so closely related and neighbors. And so they go and they work together, and they start by attacking the Canaanites and Perizzites, but the town of Bezek in particular. And they capture the king and they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And why would they do that? It seems harsh, but it is essentially to eliminate this king from potentially being a threat to them as a warrior in the future, being unable to grasp a sword or a bow and arrow, being unable to run because the big toe actually has a significant amount of influence in your balance. And so they basically made him weak. And so they didn't kill him, they just made him weak. And the king here, Adonai Bezek, he is essentially, he recognizes like he was cruel. He cut off 70 different kings' toes and big thumbs, or thumbs and big toes. And so he sees like, this is what was coming to me. And so, it seems harsh, but it was also a kind of justice against this person. And then they attacked Jerusalem and they defeated the people there and burned it. But it seems like, well, then aren't they going to take over Jerusalem? But they're not going to take over Jerusalem for many, many years. In fact, David, when he's king, is finally going to drive the Jebusites out enough so that the people of Judah can move into Jerusalem, and that will become the capital of the nation. But it's going to be a long time. And so, so they're experiencing these victories. And so then we run into verse 12. Caleb said, I will give my daughter Aksah in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sefer. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it. So Caleb gave his daughter Aksah to him in marriage. Now that sounds weird. He's her uncle. And so it's weird in our culture. I'm just going to just own that. That sounds weird. There may be a likelihood that they are half brothers, and it was not weird in their culture. And we don't know what their age difference is between Caleb and Othniel. But we're being introduced to Othniel here because he's going to be the one to carry on to be another leader, judge very soon. So one day he goes and he captures this town, and Aksah is given to Othniel in marriage. One day when Aksah came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, what can I do for you? She replied, do me a special favor. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me also springs of water. So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. The descendants of Moses' father-in-law, the Kenite, went up from the city of palms, and the city of palms is probably Jericho. And the Kenites, that's something that we're going to want to hold on to here in a little bit. But they are a nomadic tribe that is part of Moses's in-laws, essentially. And so they got kind of brought into the community of Israel and assimilated into Israel, but they were not originally a part of the 12 tribes. So they went up to the city of palms with the people of Judah to live among the inhabitants of the desert of Judah in the Negev near Arad. The men of Judah went up to the Simeonites, their fellow Israelites, and attacked the Canaanites living in Zepheth, and they totally destroyed the city. Therefore, it was called Hormah. Judah also took Gaza, Ashkelon, Ekron, each city with its territory. The Lord was with the men of Judah. They took possession of the hill country, but they were unable to drive the people from the plains because they had chariots fitted with iron. As Moses had promised, Hebron was given to Caleb, who drove from it the 3 sons of Anak. The Benjamites, however, did not drive out the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. To this day, the Jebusites live there with the Benjamites. And so we see a little bit of the progress as they're driving people out and moving people, taking the land that God promised. But one of the challenges here is they are running into these people who are stronger than them and have greater military might. And in particular, the chariots fitted with iron. These chariots were not fully made of iron. These are like a wooden cart essentially being pulled behind a horse that had some iron plating, armor of sorts. And so it was very fast. The people with chariots were the stronger military might. And so they fought and fought, and then they got to the place where we don't know if we can beat these people. Now, these chariots and things are going to be important again later, because part of what God wanted the people to understand is that he would fight for them. But as they start to see the numbers and the strength of these other nations, they stopped believing that the Lord would fight for them the way he had in the past. And so the scene is being set for us here in all of the different areas where the Lord is helping them, and they are attacking, but there's also some challenges. One of the challenges is the sons of Anak, and the Anakim are people that we have seen come up throughout the text, and these could be the giants of old, could be related to the Anakim, and so there's that overwhelming thought as well. They're not just stronger, they're also bigger, and so they did not successfully drive all of them out. Benjamin didn't drive out and all the Canaanites and the Jebusites, so they just decided to live with them, and this was not what the Lord wanted. Verse 22, now the tribes of Joseph, and so that's Ephraim and Manasseh, attacked Bethel, and the Lord was with them. When they sent men to spy out Bethel, formerly called Luz, the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, show us how we get in the city, and we will see that you are treated well. So he showed them, and they put the city to the sword, but spared the man and his whole family. He then went to the land of the Hittites, where he built a city and called it Luz, which is its name to this day. And so that's very similar to the Jericho promise. Remember the spies going to Jericho and they saved Rahab's family because Rahab helped them. And so here they go in to the city that was called Luz. It's going to be called Bethel after they conquer it. And the guy leaves and he starts a new city called Luz. And so, yeah, so that's a similarity in the history of the people here. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Bethshan and Tanakh or Dor or Ibleam or Megiddo and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. And so they are bringing the Canaanites into a kind of servitude here, of slavery, but they didn't drive them out of the land. So their presence is going to be, as we have been told many times in the past, a thorn in their side. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living near Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live there among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Nahalal. So the Canaanites lived among them, but Zebulun did subject them to forced labor. Nor did Asher drive out those living in Akko or Sidon or Halab or Aksib or Helba or Aphek or Rehob. The Asherites lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anath, but the Naphtalites who too lived among the Canaanites inhabitants of the land. And those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers for them. The Amorites confined the Danites to the hill country, but not allowing them to come down into the plain. And the Amorites were determined also to hold out in Mount Heres, Ayajalon, Sha'albim. But when the power of the tribes of Joseph increased, they too were pressed into forced labor. The boundary of the Amorites was from Scorpion's Pass to Selah and beyond. And so here the Danites were actually not even able to go into the land. The Canaanites living up there, the Amorites specifically, were determined to hold their land. And so the Danites were not able to take the land that they were supposed to go into. And so instead of this continuing conquering that we see in the book of Joshua, we begin right away in Judges to see failure. And so this is the tension that we're going to be walking through. Chapter 2, the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land I swore to give your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. Yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? And I have also said, I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you. When the angel of the Lord had spoken these things to all the Israelites, the people wept aloud, and they called that place Bochim. There they offered sacrifices to the Lord. And so this encounter with the angel of the Lord is similar to the encounter that the angel of the Lord in the book of Joshua. And so this is either the Lord speaking directly to them as a theophany. There's theories that this is a Christophany, an Old Testament appearance of Christ. Or it could just be an angel. Some people even say it could be a prophet, as because angel means messenger. And so that's kind of not a super strong argument in this situation, but here we have the angel of the Lord saying, I told you to do this and you haven't. I'm not going to break my covenant, but you are already breaking the covenant. And so these people, I'm not going to fight for you anymore, and they will be a thorn in your side. And these covenants you're making will be a trap for you. And so that's the Lord is frustrated with people, and so they are going to keep fighting, but they are not going to experience the same kinds of victories again and again. And in verse 6, we see that again after Joshua had dismissed the Israelites. So Joshua is already dead, right? And so here we are being reminded again of Joshua's leadership, and that is now over. His charismatic, unifying leadership is gone. After Joshua had dismissed the Israelites, they went to take possession of the land, each to their own inheritance. The people served the Lord throughout the lifetimes of Joshua and the elders who outlived him and who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the land of his inheritance in Timnath Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. After the whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. I have a sneeze coming. Excuse me. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors who brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served Baals and Ashtoreths. In his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. Whenever Israel went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them, just as he had sworn to them. They were in great distress. And so a generation after Joshua dies and those leaders are gone, the people fall into worshiping the Baals and Ashtoreth. Now, Baal isn't necessarily talking about many different kinds of Baals, but like specifically the Canaanite god Baal is a fertility god. And so like this is an agrarian society. And so trying to get good crops, they were attracted to this promise from this false god. And then Ashtoreth Astarte is the singular. So Astarte is the bride of Baal, essentially. And so part of their worship in these different cults was trying to arouse Baal and Ashtoreth to, in the cosmic realm, to make love so that they would create more fertility and more blessings and more rain for the people on the earth. And so these were often cults that were tied to sexuality and part of their worship. And so this is an abomination to the Lord. And so right away, they fall into these traps of these false idols. And so the Lord told them, you will do this and I will hand you over to your enemies. And that's exactly what's going on here. The Lord allowed them to be captured and plundered and oppressed. But we see in 16, then the Lord raised up judges, so deliverers, who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. Yet they would not listen to their judges, but prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They quickly turned from the ways of their ancestors, who had been obedient to the Lord's commands. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived. For the Lord relented because of their groaning under those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel and said, because this nation has violated the covenant I ordained for the ancestors and does not listen to me, I will no longer drive out them before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their ancestors did. The Lord had allowed these nations to remain. He did not drive them out at once by giving them into the hands of Joshua. And so we have this cycle that we're being introduced to in chapter 2. The people would prostitute themselves to these foreign gods. And that is a word that is like, whoa, what? And that's the kind of relationship that the writer wants us to understand. The people were selling themselves to false gods, essentially. And so this process of disobedience then led to oppression, then led to crying out, then led to God rescuing them, because he does love these people, the people of Israel, and he wants them to understand his faithfulness and his power. And so he would send a deliverer. And so this is the cycle that we see multiple times throughout Judges. And so, as I said, they're not sitting down in a court most of the time, but they are more like military leaders who the Spirit of God comes upon in some way, and they are able to do things for God to rescue the people. And so, so these, chapter 3, then, these are the nations the Lord left to test all those Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. So what's interesting here is, like, the Lord is doing this, but he's also using this as a way to help his people understand how to be warriors, because they have not seen war. And so for defending their homes and stuff, like, this is a part of where God is refining the people, helping them get stronger. And something I say often is God doesn't waste our experiences. And so even in the cycles of rebellion, oppression, crying out, rescue, that cycle, God's not wasting that for his people. And there's going to be great warriors that do rise up over time, as the people learn how to defend themselves, and which is an important part in the ancient world for these nations to be able to defend themselves. The 5 rulers of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, the Hivites living in Lebanon, mountains from Baal Hermon to Lobo Hamath, they were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands, which he had given their ancestors through Moses. Then the Israelites lived among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. They took their daughters in marriage and gave their own daughters to their sons and served their gods. And so these nations that are around, and the ones that are really testing the people, are actually not necessarily part of the Canaanite community. They're like the neighbors around Israel. And the Philistines are not even actually a part of Canaan at all. They came from Cyprus, I want to say, or Crete, and they settled. And different commentaries say that the Philistines actually were trying to go into Egypt, but the Egyptians drove them out, and so they ended up on the coastland of what we would call Israel. And so these different nations all came in, among the Canaanites to also pressure the people of Israel. And so, so now we have the stage set. The people are falling into patterns of disobedience, but the Lord raises up these deliverers. And the first one is Othniel. And we met Othniel in Joshua, and then we also met him in the first chapter of Judges as a warrior. And so in verse 7, it says, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs, which is the same as the Ashtoreths. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of Cushan Rishathaim, king of Aram Naharaim, to whom the Israelites were, to whom the Israelites were subject for 8 years. But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave Cushan Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him. So the land had peace for 40 years until Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. And so this is the first example. We, in that generation after Caleb, Othniel rises up to the challenge. He's already proved himself for his people, the tribe of Judah, and working with Caleb and taking Hebron and the different cities. And so now they are, the Lord empowers him to be a mighty warrior against the nation of Aram, the Aramites. And this king here is, this is not necessarily a name for the king. It is a title. Kushan Rishatayim is literally is Kushan of double wickedness. And so it's a kind of a nickname for him. And this is a king that came from Edom, which is, if we remember back in Genesis, Edom is descendants of Lot's family. And so these are like cousins of the people of Israel, essentially. And so they are coming to attack the people of Israel in Judah, the Judah territories, which is towards the south, and Othniel delivers them. The next judge is Ehud. And this is like my favorite story in all of the Bible. I'm telling you that now. It's so gross and so weird. So, verse 12, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel, getting the Ammonites and the Amalekites to join him. Eglon came and attacked Israel. They took possession of the city of palms. The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. And so Eglon, king of Moab, he is another part of these descendants of Lot, and he comes and attacks and takes Jericho, or the city of palms, the region of Jericho, which is a place that would have some good oasis land. The Jordan River is going along there. It's refreshing. It's cool. It's a cooler part of the land. So they take it. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, and the son of Gera the Benjamite. And this is one of the details here is that points out that he's left-handed. And I am left-handed, and that's one of the reasons that drew me to this story. But being left-handed is highlighted because usually the people who were left-handed were forced to become right-handed. And so left-handedness was not really a thing. And so there's a couple different theories for why Ehud might be left-handed. One is the way that it is says that we are told that he's left-handed, it's actually saying like his right hand was bound. And so it could be that he had some kind of deformity in his right hand, which made him use his left hand. The other part of this is that Benjamites in particular, there are different groups in their armed forces in the Benjamites who taught themselves to be ambidextrous. And so they are told we read later in the Bible about how they can shoot a bow and arrow with a right or a left hand. They can use a sling with a right or left hand. They can use a sword with a right or a left hand. And so this is an important detail that's given to us. So he could have a deformity in his hand, or he could be ambidextrous. And so either way, nobody is expecting a left-handed person because everybody is usually using their right hand. So the Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. And so tribute is bringing like a big tax of their grain or gold or their animals, all that stuff. So Eglon is sent ahead Ehud is sent to Eglon to bring the tribute. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, and it's about that long, and strapped it to his right thigh under his clothing. Why would he do that? Well, because that's not where a right-handed person would put a sword. It would be on the other side so that you could draw it and attack, right? And this sword is double-edged because most of the swords of the time were used for hacking. So they were only sharp on one side. But this is a double-edged sword, so it's used for stabbing, which is an important detail for later. And so he's hit it under his right thigh so that he could draw it with his left hand, all things that were not expected. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man, another detail that is important. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who carried it. But on reaching the stone images at Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." So he he didn't come alone to bring the tribute, but he must have worked out a plan here with all of these compatriots to say, we're going to bring this. And then when we get to Gilgal, you guys keep going. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the work that the Lord has called me to do. And so I have a secret message for you. And the king said to his attendants, leave us. And they all left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace. Now, this is in the palace. This upper room would have been like private chambers, but there might have also been a toilet type facility up there in the palace. Again, important detail. And he said, I have a message for you I have a message from God for you. And as the king rose from his seat, he had reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out and the fat closed over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came. And so Ehud is escaping. So he stabs him and like the sword like gets overwhelmed. But then also, as I was reading this is a gross story, but I mean, it's just so wonderful. Where it says the bowels discharged, one of the commentators said his anus exploded. And I just was like, bravo. Bravo, academic writer. That was fantastic. So anyway, so he then escapes out the porch. And the way that some people are translating this is like porch is kind of a cleaned up way to say this, but he probably actually like snuck down through the toilet like septic system and went out the building. And so he escaped through a not super clean way and locked all the doors between him and the exit. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors in the upper room locked. They said he must be relieving himself in the inner room of his palace. Now, why would they think that? Well, because his bowels discharged. And so there was probably a tremendous smell coming from the king's room. They waited to the point of embarrassment, which is, I love that detail. They waited till it was just embarrassing to be waiting. But when they did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their Lord fall into the floor dead. And so this waiting to the point of embarrassment was long enough, because while they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Sarai. When he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, and with him leading them. Follow me, he ordered, for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands. So they followed him down and took possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. No one escaped. That day, Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. And so Ehud is essentially an assassin. He's like a ninja for the people of Israel. And so he does this assassination work. And we're never told in this passage, like this was really something God was super like into, assassinating people. But the Lord does use Ehud to liberate his people. And the people of Ephraim, they joined forces with him to drive the Moabites out, to close the river. Essentially, those fords are the shallower parts of the Jordan where people could cross over easily. And so they go and they fortify those areas so the people of Moab can't come and try to take the land back. And so the Moabites who are in the land are trapped, and they're able to keep the Moabites out of the land as well. It's a brilliant strategic move. And so Ehud is, he's this wonderful rescuer who has maybe the grossest story in the Bible so far. And even as he's going through all of this, like, why would Eglon want a secret message? Well, because the people know that the God that the Israelites serve is very powerful. That's one of the reasons why they're trying to fight against them and even eliminate them if possible, is because they understand that Yahweh, the Lord, is strong. And so if they have a secret message from Yahweh, then they should pay attention to it. And the Lord did have a secret message for Eglon, and it was on a double-edged sword. So, so the next judge is Shamgar. One verse. After Ehud came Shamgar, the son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. And so we don't know anything really about him, but he is a son of Anat. And Anat, one of the questions is like that came up in different research is Anat is maybe a town or a person, but maybe not like maybe not the most righteous group of people. But here the Lord raised him up to lead the people. And an ox goad is like a spear, like a 6 to 8 feet long. It's really long. It's like with a point at the end. And then sometimes there would be something like a shovel on the other end. And this was his weapon that he used to fight off the Philistines. And he struck down 600, is what we're told here. And so, he is, just a strong person with able to take the available resources to fight to defend the people. So that's chapter 3. Chapter 4, then we get into Deborah, and this is a really fascinating part of the scriptures, because so far the only leadership we've seen from women in the people of Israel is Miriam, Moses' sister, and so she leads, but doesn't have a upfront type of leadership. She's under the authority of Moses and Aaron, and so here we have Deborah, who is much more upfront. So verse 1 says, "Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hatzor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Haroshet Hagoyim, because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. They cried out to the Lord for help." And so here we see this cycle happen again. Ehud died. They fall into oppression into the King Jabin. And we've seen this name before, Jabin, king of Canaan. So Jabin is more like a title, but the Lord worked with Joshua to defeat King Jabin, is one of the 5 kings. And so here his general Sisera is oppressing the people. So they cry out to the Lord. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. Now that is an interesting detail. She was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah. So this tree was a tree that was known as Deborah's tree. Like she's a prominent person between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. So she's really the best judge in this whole book of Judges. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." And so Deborah is calling Barak here to go up to Tabor. And Tabor is not like a pokey mountain like we see our mountains. It's just like a hill with like a big mound with a good plateau on it. And so going up there would actually be pretty obvious, like, hey, there's an army up there. So it's not a super great idea strategically. But she's telling him to go up there, and then I will lead Sisera. Who's I here? Is the Lord. The Lord is going to lead Sisera, the commander of the army, to the Kishon River and give him into their hands. So it's like, this is a weird strategy. And so Barak says, I will, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go. And so he recognizes Deborah's influence and would love to have this charismatic, unifying person with him. And so he's asking basically for Deborah's help. And she says, certainly I'll go with you. But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command. Deborah also went up with him. And so it's all coming together. Plans are happening. Now, in verse 11, we get this weird detail. Now, Heber, the Kenite, had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched his tent by the great tree of Zaananim near Kadesh. Now, why are we told this? This is not a super interesting detail right now, but one of the beautiful things about the storytelling in ancient Israel is they give you details before you need the details, but when the details become important, then it's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. But here, Heber, the Kenite, just wants to move away. We're just told he wanted to leave. So he left his family and found some new territory. And like this story just keeps moving. When they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron. So these chariots fitted with iron, this is the advanced military weaponry of the day. There are 900 of them. There's thousands of Israelite foot soldiers, but these 900 chariots are a overwhelming force. Then Deborah said to Barak, go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. So this is, yes, the army of Israel had the high ground on the mountain. And as they're coming down, they're seeing victory and routing the people of Israel. But there are some details here that we're not going to get until the next chapter. So Sisera fled on foot because they were overwhelmed. Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left. Sisera, meanwhile, fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was an alliance between Jabin, king of Hatzor, and the family of Heber the Kenite. Now, what? There's an alliance between Heber the Kenite? So he comes across this family that is in alliance with them, and not really like a full Israelite. So he's like, this is a safe place for me. And so he goes to the tent, and Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid. So he entered her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. Like, you must be so tired. Here, lay down, have this blanket. He said, I'm thirsty. Please give me some water. She opened a skim of milk and gave him a drink and covered him up. Now, this skim of milk is a skin of milk. They would store milk in like animal skins, any kind of liquids, really. They'd store it in animal skins. And this may have been more like a yogurt type thing as it's processing over time. But it's makes him a little sleepy as he's drinking this. Stand in the doorway of the tent, he told her. If someone comes by and asks you, is anyone in there? Say no. But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent and a hammer and went quietly to him. While he lay fast asleep, exhausted, she drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Now, she has some great skill with this tent peg because for the Kenites, assembling the tents was a women's work. This was something that the women did. They put the tents back together. And so she's very good at placing the tent peg and the hammer, and she kills Sisera while he's asleep in bed. Just then, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. Come, she said, I will show you the man you're looking for. So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with a tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him. So here, this whole story, Deborah is saying, like, calling Barak to come and fight, and he's like, I will only go if you will go with me. And she says, because of this, a woman is going to get the glory. Now, the woman that Barak probably thought was Deborah. And it's like, of course, Deborah, you're the one that's leading Israel right now. You deserve the glory. But the glory doesn't go to Deborah. The glory goes to Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, the wife of a nobody in the people of it. Like, who's Heber the Kenite? Who cares? Jael's the one who's getting the glory. And so one of the commentaries in this, as I was reading this, it's just such a wonderful line talking about Jael. Finally, murdering a guest is never a part of the protocol of hospitality. And I just love that. Like, of course it isn't. But she was used by God to defeat the general who's oppressing the people and lead them into freedom from the Jabin, the king of the Canaanites. And then Deborah leads the people in a song. And this song, we will learn more about the situation that led to this victory. So verse 1, on that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang the song. When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. Hear this, you kings. Listen, you rulers. Even I, will sing to the Lord. I will praise the Lord, the God of Israel, in song. When you, Lord, went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. And so as they're talking, they're saying, Lord, when you started moving, and the direction is moving from the east, essentially coming with the sunrise. Lord, when you moved into the land, the earth shook and it poured water from the heavens. And today was one of those days where it was beautiful and sunny, and then it was hailing like right away. Like it was a crazy weather today. And that's the kind of thing that was happening here, but like much more intense and much longer. And this is what the song of Deborah is implying, is that these rains and the earthquake, all of these things, this was the Lord's doing as he was fighting for the people. And so the victory, it says the Lord routed them with the sword, but the army of the Canaanites was also confused and overwhelmed, and they were in chariots, and the ground was soggy and wet. And so that's not a great place for chariots to be. And so their military advantage became a disadvantage because of the Lord's intervention. Verse 6, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned. Travelers took to winding paths. Villagers in Israel would not fight. They held back until I, Deborah, arose, until I arose, a mother in Israel. God chose new leaders when war came to the city gates, but not a shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's princes, with the willing volunteers among the people. Praise the Lord. And so they are recognizing the roads are dangerous. Nobody wants to leave home. Nobody wants to go and fight. But there are volunteers, and we should praise the Lord. You who ride on white donkeys, sitting on your saddle blankets, and who walk along the road, consider the voices of the singers at the watering places. They recite the victories of the Lord, the victories of his villagers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down to the city gates. Wake up, Deborah, wake up, break out in song. Arise, Barak, take captive your captive, son of Abinoam. And so, yeah, they don't have a bunch of spears. They don't have a lot of weapons, but they're rising up because they're crying out to the Lord. And so they come to get Deborah and Barak to join forces to go and fight. Verse 13, the remnant of the nobles came down. The people of the Lord came down to me against the mighty. Some came from Ephraim, whose roots were in Amalek. Benjamin was with the people who followed you. From Machir, captains came down. From Zebulun, those who bear a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Yes, Issachar was with Barak, sent under his command into the valley. In the districts of Reuben, there was much searching of heart. Why did you stay among the sheep pens? To hear the whistling for the flocks? In the districts of Reuben, there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he linger by the ships? Asher remained on the coast and stayed in his coves. The people of Zebulun risked their very lives. So did Naphtali on the terraced fields. Kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no plunder of silver from the heavens. The stars fought from their courses. They fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away. The age-old river, the river Kishon. March on, my soul, be strong. Then thundered the horses' hooves. Galloping, galloping go his mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, curse its people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord, against the mighty. So here we see this roll call of the tribes, and some tribes came and helped, other tribes didn't. They were concerned with their flocks. They were concerned with the ships on the coast. They were weren't motivated to come and be a part of rescuing the people from Jabin and Sisera. But the Lord swole, and with the rains that came, the river Kishon was swollen and flooded and swept them away. And so this song is highlighting the intervention of the Lord for the people of Israel and the victory here. And so then it says, like, all right, so the Lord did this military victory, but who defeated this general? Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent dwelling women. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. In a bowl fit for nobles, she brought him curdled milk. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. At her feet he sank, he fell. There he lay. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, he fell dead. Now, this is a song that the people are singing as like an act of worship to the Lord. And I love, it's like the most metal worship song ever. And so it's pretty awesome. Through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice, she cried out, "Why is the chariot so long in coming? Why is the clatter of his chariots delayed?" The wisest of her ladies answered her, "Indeed, she keeps her saying to herself, are they not finding and dividing the spoils, a woman or two for each man, colorful garments for plunder for Sisera, colorful garments embroidered, highly embroidered garments for my neck, all this plunder." So then it's like, look at the victory that Jael secured, but then like travel across the country and picture Sisera's mother staring out the window. Where's my son? He's taking so long. And her assumption is he must be dividing up all the spoils, the plunder, and won't it be great when he comes back? All the beautiful things that he's bringing to me. And to saying like they're taking the women, and there's two for every man. And this is like her celebration. But little does she know that Sisera's never coming home. So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. Then the land had peace for 40 years. And so that is the Song of Deborah. And you know, in the narrative, the prose portion, we see all of the human interactions and how they are doing the work that God's calling them to do. And then in the song, we get to see God's intervention on their behalf. And so we're being told the story from two angles: the angle of earth, like what's happening down here, but then also recognizing that God is orchestrating events. And even at one point talking about the stars coming out, like there would, some say that there was like an eclipse of some sort, so that day stars that you don't normally see because the sun is too bright, like the day stars are out, and like that eclipse is causing confusion with the flooded rivers and the chariots unable to advance, all of these different things. Like God's orchestrating this for their behalf. And so the Song of Deborah is to help the people remember, look at what God has done. And when humans partner with the Lord, he is able to do more and than we can even imagine. But part of the trouble with the book of Judges is the people keep falling away from trusting God because they would rather trust the things they can see. And so, so it's 5 chapters of Judges tonight. It was a lot, but let's stop there. Next week, we'll get into Gideon. But for that, we'll stop here. Any thoughts or questions on these passages that we worked through tonight? No? All right.
I like this.
What's that?
This is Carrie. I was gonna say, I have to say, I like this one.
Which one?
Well,
Deborah?
the storyline, I mean, is very action packed.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The book of Judges is all stories, and there's tons of action. There's no laws. There's no dividing of land, all of those things. Like Joshua was so promising. We're getting into all this cool action. And then it's like, and then their territory went from here to 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 here. So yeah, but right away, we're just like, boom, things are happening. So yeah. Any other thoughts or observations from these chapters?
Like, I think I had said this one before the other time, where it says they forsook the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep wondering, I'm like, I thought that the Israel culture, you continually, pass on to from one generation to the other what the Lord has done for them. And were their children just not listening?
Well, there is the command that the Lord gives to, and there are the ideals that they're to live up to. But they still are people who have to make the decision for themselves. And so are their children not listening? Maybe, but are parents displaying to their children faithfulness to the Lord? That's the real question that is not answered in this text. But they forgot what God had done. And so it's not just the children, it's not just the parents. They forgot. They forsook the Lord. So, yeah. But when you treat God like a cosmic vending machine and he doesn't vend for a while, then you go to the vending machine that does vend, right? You the one that does seem to give you things that you want. So that's why they turn over to Baals and Asherahs, because they think that they are able to manipulate Baal and Ashtoreth, which, they're just falling into sinful behavior, thinking they're doing something, but they are not, because, but you can't manipulate the Lord. That's one of the key things throughout the scriptures is the sacrifices, all of these things. Is not manipulating God to do something for you. It's honoring God because you recognize all that he has already done for you. So it's a totally different perspective on why you worship. Is because of God's faithfulness in the first place, not demanding something from him.
Yeah, very true. And it just, I guess that part always reminds me that how from every generation to every generation, we're all the same. We all make the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Yeah. People are people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Chris, I saw that you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, nothing. I mean, I learned stuff. I had in my mind always thought that Deborah was the one that was the spike lady.
Oh, yeah.
But I learned that it was not Deborah. It was Jael. Is she ever mentioned again?
Ever mentioned again? I don't think so.
Okay.
I can't think of any off the top of my head, but we'll keep reading, and if she comes up again, we'll know. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. There is one similarity between Jael and another passage in scripture. It says, most blessed of women be Jael. And the only other person who is called, only other woman who's called most blessed is Mary, the mother of Jesus. And so there is that little connection as we move forward in the Bible. But I can't think of any time where she is mentioned. And often most of the judges are not going to be mentioned again in the Bible. So this is
she wasn't a judge, right?
Who? Jael?
Jael wasn't a judge. She was so-and-so's wife.
Yeah, she was Heber the Kenite's wife. She was not a judge. Deborah was the judge, but
True.
Jael was still used by God.
The wife of a nobody.
That's the wife of a nobody. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, who cares who Heber the Kenite is? As you read, sometimes I just want to encourage you guys, as you're reading the Bible, sometimes you will get a detail where it's like, why do I care about this? But pay attention, because that detail might come up later, because the writers in these historical books, they are giving us so much just in time information. And so pay attention to those things. In my Bible reading, I'm in the book of Chronicles the last couple of days, and I was reading through the genealogies, and I was like so excited, because I was like, I know these names. I've read about these people, but then you also are getting like this second genealogy, and I'm like, why am I getting this right now? And I'm excited to see, like, how does this end up in Chronicles? I couldn't remember off the top of my head, like, why are these here? And that was just in my devotional reading. And but then you also come across these little stories in those genealogies that is like, this is interesting. Like Jabez, like many of us read the prayer of Jabez, and there was a whole group of people who are like, God wants to bless you, but it's like, that's not really the point of the book of Jabez. Is not that we should pray the same prayer, but just to recognize, like, look, here's somebody who's faithful in the midst of just a bunch of names. Like, look at his faithfulness to the Lord. That's a good thing in itself. So yeah, genealogies have just been so fun for me lately. It's so much fun. Tony said there should be a TV series called The Judges. And Tony, I would totally agree with you, but it cannot be on like network television. It's got to be like on HBO or something, because Judges is too violent, and it's too adult for like primetime television. And so I would hate to have it like watered down for the masses so that it could be played between soap commercials. So that's just my opinion, but I agree. I would totally watch that show. So yeah. Any other thoughts?
Mm-mm.
All right. Well, I do think the book of Judges is full of awesome stories. And if you are reading throughout the week and find yourself in Judges, like, slow down and imagine the picture. Imagine what's happening. Like, next week, we're going to read about Gideon. And Gideon is threshing wheat in a wine press. Why? Because he's afraid. He's a coward. And so he's trying to hide. And like, there's those kinds of details that try to imagine it, try to picture it. It really does come to life. And so, yeah, so I like a good TV series for the Old Testament would just be so awesome. So I'm hoping that the chosen folks finish up the Gospels with Jesus and stuff, and then they go to like the life of David. Oh man, that'd be awesome. So yeah. All right, well, let's wrap it here, because there's children above me for youth group, so they're done. And so I'm gonna get my kids and we'll head on home. So I'll talk to you all next week. Have a good one.
All right. Good night, guys. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Night.